Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Victoria Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the grand estate, watching raindrops race down the glass like tears she refused to shed. The mansion sprawled across 20 acres of manicured grounds, every corner screaming wealth and power, yet she felt like a ghost haunting its empty halls. At 28, she possessed a quiet beauty that drew second glances, soft auburn hair that caught sunlight like copper, gentle green eyes that held depths of unspoken pain, and a grace that came from years of trying to be invisible. 3 years ago, she had walked into this house as Adrian Blackwood's bride, believing that love might somehow bloom from the arrangement their families had orchestrated. Her father's construction company had been drowning in debt, facing bankruptcy that would destroy not just their business, but the livelihoods of hundreds of workers. Adrian's father had offered salvation, a merger that would save both companies, sealed with a marriage between their children. The untouchable husband Adrian Blackwood commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. At 32, he had transformed his father's moderate shipping business into a global empire worth billions. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, his steel-gray eyes missed nothing, and his presence could silence a room with a single glance. He was the kind of man who wore $1,000 suits like armor and treated emotions like weaknesses to be eliminated. Victoria had learned early in their marriage that Adrian viewed her as a beautiful ornament, something to display at charity, galas and business dinners, then forget about once they returned home. He had never touched her with tenderness, never shared his thoughts or fears, never once called her by name when they were alone. She was simply "you" or "my wife" when he addressed her at all. Morning rituals of rejection each morning. Victoria would rise before dawn to prepare Adrian's breakfast exactly as he preferred: black coffee, 2 sugars, whole grain toast, with just a hint of butter and fresh fruit cut into precise pieces. She would arrange everything on the finest china, add a single white rose from the garden, and wait. Adrian would appear at exactly 7:30, scan the table with those cold eyes, eat in silence while reading his tablet, then leave without a word. "Good morning, Adrian," she would say softly, hope flickering in her voice like a candle in the wind. He would glance up briefly, nod once, and return to his screen. Never good morning back. Never thank you. Never acknowledgement that she existed beyond her function as his wife. Mrs. Helena, the elderly housekeeper who had worked for the Blackwood family for decades, would watch these morning scenes with growing sadness. She had seen Adrian as a boy, had witnessed the gradual hardening of his heart after his mother's death and his father's emotional abandonment. But she also saw Victoria's quiet suffering, the way her shoulders would slump slightly each time. Adrian ignored her gentle attempts at connection. The anniversary dinner on their 3rd wedding anniversary, Victoria had planned something special. She spent the entire day preparing Adrian's favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. It's paired with a wine from their honeymoon in Tuscany. She wore the emerald green dress he had once complimented, styled her hair the way he had mentioned he liked, and waited. The dining room glowed with candlelight. The table was set with their wedding china, adorned with white roses and trailing ivy. She had even found the same music that played at their wedding reception, letting it drift softly through the room. Every detail was perfect, crafted with the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. 8 o'clock came and went. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. The salmon grew cold, the candles burned low, and Victoria sat alone at the table, her hands folded in her lap, fighting back tears. At 11:30, Adrian finally walked through the door, his tie loosened, his shirt wrinkled from a long day of meetings. "What's all this?" he asked, surveying the elaborate setup with mild irritation. "It's our anniversary," Victoria said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we could have dinner together." Adrian glanced at his watch, then at the cold food on the table. "I already ate with clients. You should have told me you were planning something." "I wanted to surprise you," she replied, standing slowly. "I made your favorite. I don't like surprises, Victoria." "You know that." His tone was sharp, dismissive. "I have early meetings tomorrow. I'm going to bed." He walked past her without another word, leaving her alone with the romantic dinner that had taken all day to prepare. Victoria stood there for a long moment, then began clearing the table, her movements mechanical, her heart breaking a little more with each plate she carried to the kitchen. The arrival of Camila. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in October when Camila Rose returned to the city. She was everything Victoria was not: bold, confident, breathtakingly beautiful, with platinum blonde hair and sapphire blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets. She had been Adrian's lover before his marriage, a model-turned-fashion designer, who had left him to pursue her career in Paris. Victoria first learned of Camila's return through a gossip magazine Mrs. Helena had accidentally left on the kitchen counter. The headline screamed, "Fashion icon Camila Rose returns home, reuniting with former flame." Below it was a photo of Adrian and Camila at a charity auction, standing closer than mere friends, her hand resting on his arm with familiar intimacy. Victoria stared at the image, her heart clenching. She had never seen Adrian smile the way he was smiling at Camila in that photo, warm, genuine, alive. It was the smile she had dreamed of earning for 3 long years. The confrontation that evening. Victoria waited for Adrian in his study, the magazine clutched in her trembling hands. When he finally arrived home, she was sitting in the leather chair across from his desk, her back straight, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Adrian paused in the doorway, his expression cautious. "About what?" She held up the magazine. "About her, about Camila." His face went blank, that mask of indifference he wore so well sliding into place. "She's a business associate. Nothing more." "Business associates don't look at each other like that," Victoria said, standing slowly. "Adrian, I know you don't love me. I've known it for 3 years, but I'm still your wife. I deserve honesty." "You're being dramatic," he said, moving to his desk and opening his laptop. "Camila and I have history, yes, but it's in the past." "Is it?" Victoria stepped closer, her voice growing stronger. "Because she's been calling you. I've seen the messages on your phone. She's been to your office. People are talking, Adrian. They're saying you two are enough." His voice cut through her words like a blade. "What I do and who I see is my business. You're my wife in name only. Victoria, don't forget that." The words hit her like physical blows. She had endured 3 years of coldness, of feeling invisible, of loving someone who couldn't love her back. But this casual cruelty was more than she could bear. The decision, Victoria retreated to her bedroom, the guest room she had occupied since their wedding night, and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for: Thomas Wayne, a divorce attorney recommended by a friend. Her finger hovered over the call button. Once she made this call, there would be no going back. The facade of their marriage would crumble. She would have to face the world knowing she had failed to make Adrian love her. But as she sat there in the darkness, surrounded by the expensive furnishings that had never felt like home, Victoria realized she was already living with failure. She was failing herself every day she stayed in this beautiful prison, hoping for scraps of affection from a man who saw her as nothing more than an obligation. She pressed the call button. The papers are drawn the next morning. Victoria met with Thomas Wayne in his downtown office. He was a kind man in his 50s, with gentle eyes that reminded her of her father. He listened as she explained her situation: the arranged marriage, the 3 years of emotional neglect, the recent return of Adrian's former lover. "I don't want anything from him," Victoria said firmly. "No alimony, no part of his business. I just want my freedom." Thomas studied her carefully. "Mrs. Blackwood, you're entitled to significant assets. Your husband is worth billions." "I didn't marry him for his money," Victoria replied. "I married him hoping we could build something real together. That was my mistake, not his." The divorce papers were drawn up within a week. Victoria carried them home in a manila envelope, her heart pounding with each step. She found Adrian in his study as always, bathed in the blue light of his computer. Screen Adrian, she said softly, standing in the doorway. I need to give you something. He looked up, and for a moment, she saw something flicker in his gray eyes. Surprise, maybe even concern. But it was gone so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. She placed the envelope on his desk. Divorce papers. I've already signed them. Adrian stared at the envelope as if it might explode. Victoria, what is this about? It's about 3 years of trying to love someone who doesn't want to be loved. She said, her voice calm despite the storm raging inside her. It's about accepting that some things can't be forced, no matter how much we want them to work. You can't just leave, Adrian said, his voice sharp with something that might have been panic. We have an arrangement. Our families wanted a merger. They got it. The businesses are connected now. They don't need our marriage to survive. Victoria stepped back, putting distance between them. I'm tired, Adrian. I'm tired of being invisible in my own home. I'm tired of loving someone who sees me as nothing more than a contract to be honored. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped. Her? Victoria? Wait. When she looked back, his mask had slipped slightly, revealing something raw and uncertain underneath. Where will you go? I don't know yet, she said honestly. But anywhere is better than here. She left him sitting there, staring at the papers that would set them both free. As she walked upstairs to pack, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Not hope that Adrian would change, but hope that somewhere out there she might find the life she had been searching for all along. The first part of her journey was ending. The second was about to begin. 2 weeks after Victoria served Adrian with divorce papers, Dr. James Mitchell returned to the city. He had been Victoria's closest friend during college, a brilliant medical student who had always harbored feelings for her that he never confessed. When he heard through mutual friends that Victoria was getting divorced, he couldn't stay away any longer. James was now a successful cardiologist, tall and lean, with kind brown eyes and a gentle smile that had comforted countless patients. He had spent the last 5 years building his practice in Boston, but Victoria's situation drew him back like a magnet. He had loved her since their sophomore year, watching helplessly as she married Adrian Blackwood in what everyone knew was a business arrangement. Victoria was volunteering at the Children's Hospital when James found her. She was reading stories to young patients, her voice soft and animated as she brought fairy tales to life. When she looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, her face lit up with genuine joy for the first time in months. James, she exclaimed, setting down the book and rushing to embrace him. What are you doing here? I heard you might need a friend, he said simply, holding her close. How are you holding up, Vic? The childhood nickname brought tears to her eyes. It had been so long since someone had spoken to her with such warmth and familiarity. I'm managing, she said, wiping her eyes. It's been difficult, but I'm finally doing something for myself. Camilla's manipulation. Meanwhile, Camilla Rose was weaving her web of deception with the skill of a master manipulator. He had returned to the city with one goal: to reclaim Adrian Blackwood and the life of luxury she had given up years ago. Her fashion career in Paris had been moderately successful, but it hadn't provided the wealth and status she craved. Adrian represented everything she wanted: power, money, and prestige. Camilla had been watching Victoria and James from the shadows, hiring a private investigator to document their meetings. She knew that Adrian's pride was his greatest weakness, and she intended to exploit it fully. Darling, she purred into her phone, calling Adrian during one of their increasingly frequent dinners. I have something you need to see. Can you meet me at the Rosewood Hotel tonight? Adrian hesitated. Since Victoria had filed for divorce, he found himself feeling strangely unsettled. The house seemed emptier without her quiet presence, and he caught himself looking for her in the places she used to be. But Camilla's invitation promised distraction from thoughts he didn't want to examine. The fabricated evidence at the Rosewood Hotel. Camilla met Adrian in the penthouse suite she had rented for the occasion. She wore a stunning red dress that hugged every curve, her platinum hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. The room was dimly lit with candles, champagne chilling in a silver bucket. You look troubled, Camilla said, moving close to him and running her fingers along his jaw. Let me help you forget your worries. She handed him a tablet containing carefully edited photos of Victoria and James. The images had been manipulated to suggest intimacy that didn't exist, a hug cropped to look like a kiss, hands that appeared to be holding when they were simply gesturing, private moments stolen and twisted to tell a false story. I'm sorry you've had to find out this way, Camila said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But I thought you should know what your dear wife has been doing while you've been working so hard. Adrian stared at the images, his jaw clenching. The photos showed Victoria laughing with James, walking close together, sharing what appeared to be intimate conversations. In one particularly damning image, it looked as though James was kissing Victoria's forehead while she leaned into him. How long has this been going on? Adrian asked, his voice deadly quiet. According to my source, they were college sweethearts. He's been waiting for her all these years. Camila moved behind him, her hands resting on his shoulders. She never loved you, Adrian. She was just waiting for the right moment to leave. The words hit Adrian like physical blows. For 3 years, he had kept Victoria at arm's length, telling himself it was better to maintain distance than risk the kind of pain his father had experienced when his mother died. But seeing these photos, believing that Victoria had been playing him for a fool all along, unleashed a rage he didn't know he possessed. The confrontation, Adrian stormed home that night, finding Victoria in the garden where she often went to think. She was sitting on the stone bench beneath the old oak tree, reading a book by moonlight. She looked up as he approached, and her smile faded when she saw the fury in his eyes. Having a nice evening? He asked, his voice cold as winter wind. Yes. Actually, Victoria replied, closing her book. It's peaceful out here. I've been thinking about your lover, Adrian interrupted, pulling out his phone and showing her the fabricated photos. Victoria's face went white as she stared at the images. Adrian, this isn't what it looks like. These photos are lies, he sneered, just like our entire marriage has been a lie? Just like your innocent act has been a lie? No. Victoria stood, reaching for him. James is my friend. We've never been anything more than friends. Someone has manipulated these photos enough. Adrian's voice echoed through the garden. 3 years, Victoria. 3 years I've provided for you, given you everything you could want, and this is how you repay me? By carrying on with your college boyfriend behind my back? Tears streamed down Victoria's face. Adrian, please listen to me. I would never betray you. I love you. I've loved you since the day we married, even though you've never given me a reason to hope love. Adrian laughed bitterly. You don't know the meaning of the word? Pack your things and get out. I want you gone by morning. Adrian, please get out, he roared, his composure finally cracking completely. I never want to see you again. Departure. Victoria fled to her room, her heart shattered beyond repair. She packed a single suitcase with essentials, her hands shaking as she folded clothes through her tears. Mrs. Helena found her there, sitting on the bed with her wedding photo in her hands. Oh, my dear child, the elderly woman said, sitting beside her. What has that foolish man done now? He thinks I've been unfaithful, Victoria whispered. Someone showed him photos of me with James, but they're not real. They've been altered. Adrian won't listen to me. Mrs. Helena took the photo from Victoria's trembling hands, showed Adrian and Victoria on their wedding day, he looking distant and formal, she looking hopeful despite everything. I've watched that man struggle with his heart for 30 years, she said gently. His father taught him that love was weakness, that caring for someone only led to pain. But I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. He loves you, child. He's just too afraid to admit it. It doesn't matter now, Victoria said, standing and pulling her suitcase from the closet. He's made his choice. I'd rather believe lies than trust in what we could have had. Victoria left the mansion before dawn, driving away from the only home she had known as Adrian's wife. She didn't see him standing at his bedroom window, watching her car disappear down the long driveway, his fists pressed against the glass. James's. Comfort. Victoria found refuge in a small apartment downtown. Using money she had saved from her modest allowance over the years, James helped her move in, providing the friendship and support she desperately needed. He never once said, "I told you so," or criticized Adrian. Though his anger at Victoria's treatment was evident in the tightness around his eyes. "You deserve so much better than this," James said as they unpacked boxes in her new living room. "You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are." Victoria managed a weak smile. "Right now, I just want to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be someone's wife." Over the following weeks, James became Victoria's anchor in the storm. He took her to medical conferences where she met other doctors and researchers, introduced her to work at free clinics where her compassionate nature could flourish, and slowly helped her remember who she had been before Adrian Blackwood dimmed her light. But James wanted more than friendship. And Victoria could sense it in the way he looked at her, the gentle touches that lingered a moment too long, the careful way he avoided mentioning other women. She cared for him deeply, but her heart still belonged to the man who had thrown her away based on lies. Adrian's emptiness back at the mansion. Adrian threw himself into work with renewed intensity, staying at the office until midnight and coming home only to sleep. But the house felt wrong without Victoria's presence. There was no fresh coffee waiting in the morning, no flowers brightening the rooms, no soft humming drifting from the kitchen as she cooked. Camila had moved back into his life with practiced ease, attending business functions as his date. Staying overnight in the master bedroom Victoria had never been invited to share. She was everything a man like Adrian should want: beautiful, sophisticated, understanding of his world. But something felt hollow about their reunion, though he refused to examine why. "You're distracted, darling," Camila said one evening as they attended a charity gala. "Still thinking about her?" "No." Adrian replied curtly, though his eyes had been scanning the crowd unconsciously, looking for auburn hair and green eyes that wouldn't be there. "Good," Camila smiled, pressing closer to him. "She never deserved you anyway. I heard she's been seen all over town with that doctor. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Each mention of Victoria and James felt like a knife twisting in Adrian's chest, but he forced himself to show no reaction. He had made his choice. He had chosen to believe the evidence rather than trust in the woman who had stood by him for 3 years. There was no going back now. 3 months after Victoria's departure, Adrian's world began to crumble in ways he never expected. It started with a phone call from his head of security, Marcus Stone, a former FBI agent Adrian trusted implicitly. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to see you immediately," Marcus said, his voice grim. "It's about those photos of your wife." Adrian's blood ran cold. "What about them? I'll explain everything when I get there. But sir, you need to prepare yourself. Someone has been playing a very dangerous game." When Marcus arrived at Adrian's office, he carried a thick folder and a laptop. His usually composed demeanor was replaced by barely controlled anger. "I've been investigating Ms. Rose's activities since she returned to the city." Marcus began opening the laptop. "Something about her story didn't sit right with me. Fashion. Designers don't typically hire private investigators and photo manipulation experts." Adrian's heart began to pound as Marcus showed him the evidence. Bank records showing payments from Camila to a private investigator. Email chains discussing the best angles to photograph Victoria and James. Most damning of all, the original, unedited photos that showed nothing more than 2 friends catching up over coffee and supporting each other through a difficult time. "Kiss you saw was him comforting her after she broke down crying about your marriage," Marcus explained. The investigator captured her moment of vulnerability and turned it into evidence of an affair that never happened. Adrian stared at the real photos, seeing Victoria's pain written clearly across her face. In every image she looked heartbroken, lost, clinging to James not as a lover, but as a lifeline in a storm of grief. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Ms. Rose has been telling people around town that you're planning to marry her as soon as your divorce is finalized. She's already been looking at wedding venues." The folder contained social media posts, overheard conversations, and a paper trail of Camila's calculated deception. She had orchestrated everything from her carefully timed return to the fabricated evidence, all designed to destroy Adrian's marriage and claim his fortune. The confrontation with Adrian found Camila at her penthouse that evening. Surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric samples, she looked up with a radiant smile when he entered. clearly expecting a romantic evening. "Darling, I was just looking at venues for our wedding. I think a spring ceremony would be. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. Camila's smile faltered. "Find out about what?" Adrian threw the folder onto her coffee table, photos and documents scattering across the glass surface. "About the lies, about the fake photos, about the private investigator you hired to destroy my marriage." For a moment, Camila's mask slipped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "Ah." Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your marriage was already destroyed, Adrian. I just helped you see the truth about what that little mouse really was. The truth." Adrian stepped closer, his fury barely contained. "The truth is that Victoria loved me more than I deserved, and you couldn't stand that someone might actually be happy." "Happy?" Camila sneered. "You were miserable with her. Admit it. She was boring, plain, nothing like what you need. I did you a favor?" "You destroyed the only real thing in my life," Adrian said, his voice breaking slightly. "And for what? Money? Status? Did you really think I could love someone capable of such cruelty?" Camila's composure cracked completely. "I loved you first. I gave you everything, and you let me go. When I came back, you were wasting yourself on that pathetic little girl who didn't even know how to please you." "Get out," Adrian said quietly. "Get out of this city. If I ever see you again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." The search begins. Adrian's search for Victoria became an obsession. He hired the best private investigators, contacted every mutual acquaintance, and scoured the city looking for any trace of her. But Victoria had seemingly vanished, leaving no forwarding address and no clues about where she might have gone. James had also disappeared, leading Adrian to assume they had left together. The thought tormented him, but he knew he had no right to jealousy. He had driven Victoria into another man's arms. With his cruelty and blindness, Mrs. Helena watched her employer's decline with growing concern. Adrian had lost weight, was barely sleeping, and spent hours staring at the garden, where he had destroyed his marriage with false accusations. "She's gone to her aunt's house in Vermont," Mrs. Helena finally said one morning, unable to watch his suffering any longer. Adrian looked up from his untouched breakfast. "What?" "Victoria, she's staying with her Aunt Ruth in a small town called Millbrook. She goes by her maiden name now, Victoria Sterling. She's working at the local library and volunteering at an animal shelter." "How do you know this?" Adrian asked, hope and fear warring in his chest. "Because I care about that girl. Like she was my own daughter," Mrs. Helena replied firmly. "And because she writes to me every week. She asks about you, Mr. Blackwood. Even after everything you put her through, she still cares about your well-being." Victoria's new life in the picturesque town of Millbrook, Vermont. Victoria had indeed found a measure of peace. She lived in a cozy cottage behind her Aunt Ruth's farmhouse, surrounded by rolling hills and maple trees that turned brilliant gold and red in the autumn light. The work at the library was quiet and fulfilling, and the animals at the shelter provided the unconditional love she had been craving for so long. James had helped her move and stayed for a week to make sure she was settled. But then he had returned to Boston. Their friendship remained strong, but James had finally accepted that Victoria's heart belonged to someone else, even if that someone had shattered it beyond repair. "You're healing," Aunt Ruth observed one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Ruth was Victoria's father's sister, a widow who had never remarried after losing her husband in the war. She understood the complexities of love and loss better than most. "I'm trying," Victoria replied, absently petting the golden retriever who had followed her home from the shelter. "Some days are easier than others. Do you still love him?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think I know how to stop, but I'm learning to love myself too. That's something I forgot how to do." The unexpected arrival in a crisp October morning. Victoria was reading stories to children at the library when she heard a commotion at the front desk. Looking up, she saw a familiar figure standing uncertainly in the doorway, its usually perfect appearance rumpled from travel. Adrian looked older, thinner, With shadows under his gray eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and regret, he was scanning the room desperately until his gaze found hers, and the raw emotion on his face took her breath away. Victoria excused herself from the children and walked toward him on unsteady legs. They stood facing each other across the small library, years of pain and misunderstanding stretching between them like a chasm. "Victoria," Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I have no right to be here. I know I destroyed everything we had, but I need you to know the truth." "I know the truth," Victoria said quietly, "about the photos, about Camila. James told me everything he discovered before he left." Adrian's face crumpled. "Then you know what a fool I've been? You know, that I threw away the most precious thing in my life because I was too afraid to trust and love." "Why are you here, Adrian?" Victoria asked, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. "Because I love you," he said, the words tumbling out like a dam had burst. "Because I've loved you since the day you married me, and I was too terrified to admit it, because I'd rather spend the rest of my life trying to earn your forgiveness than live another day without you." The long road home, Victoria stared at him, seeing the truth written in every line of his face. This wasn't the cold, controlled man who had married her 3 years ago. This was someone broken and rebuilt, someone who had learned the true cost of pride and fear. "It's not that simple, Adrian," she said, tears starting to fall. "You didn't just divorce me, you shattered my heart. You made me believe I was worthless, that my love meant nothing." "I know." Adrian stepped closer, his own tears flowing freely now. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Victoria, please, give me a chance to show you that I've changed. Give me a chance to love you the way you deserved to. Be loved from the beginning." The librarian and several patrons were staring now, but neither Adrian nor Victoria cared. They were lost in each other, in the possibility of redemption and second chances. "I'm not the same woman who left your house," Victoria said. "I won't go back to being invisible. I won't accept scraps of affection or live in the shadow of your fears. Dare. I don't want you to," Adrian replied. "I want to build something new with you, something real. I want to court you properly this time, to earn your trust and your love. I want to be the husband you deserved all along." New beginnings, their reconciliation wasn't instant or easy. Victoria insisted that Adrian stay in town for a month, getting to know her new life and proving that his feelings were genuine. He rented a room at the local inn and spent his days learning who Victoria had become, volunteering at the animal shelter, helping elderly residents with their shopping, organizing book clubs at the library. Adrian discovered a woman he had never taken the time to see before, someone with strength, compassion, and a quiet wisdom that came from surviving heartbreak. He fell in love with her all over again, this time with his eyes wide open. They took long walks through the autumn woods, talking about everything they had never shared before. Adrian told her about his childhood, about watching his father's bitterness after his mother's death, about the fear that had driven him to keep everyone at arm's length. Victoria shared her dreams, her hopes for the future, her desire to make a real difference in the world. "I want to expand the animal shelter," she said, one evening as they sat by the fireplace in her cottage. "Turn it into a full rehabilitation center for abandoned and abused animals. I want to create something beautiful from the pain I've experienced." "Then we'll do it," Adrian said simply. "Whatever you want, whatever you need, we'll make it happen together." The second wedding 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, Victoria Sterling and Adrian Blackwood were married again, this time in the garden behind Victoria's cottage, surrounded by the people who had supported them through their darkest hours. Aunt Ruth walked Victoria down the aisle. Mrs. Helena stood as matron of honor, and even James was there, having found his own happiness with a fellow doctor in Boston. This wedding was nothing like their first cold, formal ceremony. Victoria wore a simple white dress adorned with wildflowers. Adrian's voice shook as he read the vows he had written himself. And when they kissed as husband and wife, it was with the passion and tenderness of two people who had fought their way back to love. "I promise to see you," Adrian whispered against her lips. "Every day for the rest of our lives, I promise to really see you. And I promise to trust in us," Victoria whispered back. "Even when it's scary, even when it's hard, I promise to believe in what we can build together." forever after 3 years. Later, the Victoria Sterling Animal Rehabilitation Center was thriving, funded by the Blackwood Foundation and staffed by volunteers from around the region. Victoria and Adrian had built a new home on the property, not a mansion designed to impress, but a warm, welcoming house filled with rescued animals and the laughter of the children they had eventually adopted. Adrian had learned to balance his business empire with the life he valued more, evenings spent reading bedtime stories. Weekend picnics in the meadow, quiet moments watching Victoria work with frightened animals, coaxing them back to trust with infinite patience. On their 6th wedding anniversary, or 3rd, depending on how you counted, they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard while their dogs dozed in the sunshine. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked, leaning against Adrian's shoulder. "Giving up the corporate life, the fancy parties, all of that?" Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Never. This is what I was searching for all my life. I just didn't know it until I almost lost it." "We almost lost each other," Victoria corrected gently. "But we didn't," Adrian replied, tightening his arms around her. "We found our way back home, and in the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by the life they had built from the ashes of their broken beginning, they knew that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with an ending and then write themselves anew." The end.
Since you guys have watched the entire story, I want you guys to give us your feedback, let us know how you feel, and we would really like to know if you guys would comment us and share with us how we can improve. Obviously, I feel everybody in this world knows there's room for improvement. So if you guys let us know with your feedback how we can improve, we will definitely work on that. Thank you guys for watching us. Stay connected with us. Your host, Alistair.